Welcome, Emily GREER.
I think hopefully a fair number of you know Kongregate, but I'm going to give some background just to start so that you understand where I'm coming from and where some of our numbers coming from. Most of you know us as sort of a flash game portal. The way I describe us is as an open platform for browser-based games. So a little bit like YouTube, anybody can upload. We take all kinds of games. Majority are Flash, but Unity, HTML, HTML5, if it's in a browser, that works for us. Because of the openness of the platform, we get a ton of games. We get about 1,300 every month, and I think just today, past 60,000 games, which was pretty cool. Of those 1,300, 200 approximately are selling virtual goods, and the rest of this talk, I'm just going to be concentrating on that because we're all here, at least partly for the money. And interestingly, of those 200 games are doing 70% of our revenue. Our ad business has been strong and growing, but the virtual goods has really exploded, and it's really concentrated even within those 200 games where the top 50 are doing definitely the majority. And that revenue is coming from 15 million monthly uniques, and these are core gamers. This is the casual industry, but really it's a funny thing where we have a lot of casual games, but they're being played by core gamers, males, 13 to 34. They love shooting zombies, but they also love puzzle games. And quickly, we were acquired by GameStop in July of 2010. So to give you a sample of the types of games that are using our virtual goods platform, you can see here's a sample of select developers. You can see it's both Eastern, Western, social games, standalone MMOs. And the games that are doing well are nearly all multiplayer and nearly all sort of deep and strategic. Lots of RPGs, lots of strategy, empire building, collectible card games are huge for us. So pretty geeky in general. And so you may take some of what I say with a little bit of grain of salt because it is this type of game. But I honestly think that a lot of these things still apply to a super casual game on mobile as well. So the advantage of having a platform is that you can do really good comparative stats. Most developers are just looking at their own stats. Maybe they have a couple of games, maybe they have 10, but essentially games made by the same people and who are likely to make the same good decisions and the same bad decisions. We can compare across a really broad number and really dig into what drives success. Looking at Lifecycle, what we found is that big spenders are a really big deal. So this is a breakout from our top revenue game, looking at all of the buyers and dividing them up by how much they've spent. Not surprisingly, the biggest group is the people who spent under $10, which is 38%. Another third or so is spent between 10 and 50, and then you get the higher denominations are getting small. 5% have spent more than $500. The average revenue per paying user, ARPU in this game, is 140, which is, I'd say, a little on the high side, but not exceptional at all for us. We've got games that are above 200. And the top spender in this game has spent between $20,000 and $30,000. So that's the breakdown of the buyers. If you look at it as a percent of revenue, oh my gosh, Pac-Man has come, and that 5% of users spending $500 or more are 68% of the revenue. They're just completely dominating everything. And that 38% who spent less than $10 are only representing 2% of your revenue. No, everybody likes another percent or two of revenue, but it's really, in the scheme of things, is not that significant. That's our top revenue game, but honestly, this is broadly applicable against all of our successful games. 4 out of the top 5 games get the majority of their revenue from those spending $500 or more, and all top 10 games, even those that have an average revenue ARPU of $20, $25, all top 10 are getting the majority of the revenue from people who spent $100 or more. So When we first started seeing people spending thousands and thousands of dollars, I was a little uncomfortable with it. And I think there's a lot of people in this room and people outside in the regular world in the gaming industry who have similar, slightly mixed feelings. I mean, spending a lot of money on something that's virtual, that you can't hold, feels a little strange. So as part of that, I decided to dig into some individual big spenders and look at what they were spending it on, what motivated them, and just get deep into it. So this is one that I got to know pretty well. They are somebody who's playing an action RPG game. It's single player in a social environment. And that's pretty typical of games successful games. They mix single player and multiplayer. There's skill-based leveling and multiple class paths that create some complexity. There's guilds and co-op multiplayer, and at the far end game, PvP and tournaments with lots of modes. So annually they spend about $5,000. About $2,000 goes to consumables and energy. $1,800 goes to skill upgrades. $400 equipment, guild items, tournaments. Those also contribute. So that player is in their 30s and plays 4 to 6 days a week, over 1,000 lifetime plays, and they play and spend in other games, but 90% of their money and time is spent in their main game, and this is really typical of big spenders. They may play other games and they spend in other games above average, but 85, 90, 95% of their spending is going to occur in just one game. So, shocking reveal, I'm the big spender. So I said I knew them well. And now you want to know, what am I spending it on? What's the game? I'm actually spending it on figure skating. It's not a game at all, and that's me. It's far more unusual and dorkier and weirder than spending in an online game. So, people have been talking about gamified for the last couple of years, and figure skating has been super gamified for 50 or 60 years. There are 15 levels. You level up after earning 5 to 6 skill achievements. I leveled, and they have a really gamified, nice leveling curve where in my first lesson I leveled up, but now it takes me about a year to get to the next level, and currently I need to get an axle and a camel spin to get my gold freestyle. The Skating Club of San Francisco is my guild, and if it makes it any less dorky what I'm doing, Brian Boitano is also a member, and I get to see him on a regular basis. To completely go the opposite way of that endorsement, I'm also on a synchronized skating team, and you can see this little picture here of us in our Polish barmaid outfit, glory, which is a lot of glory. And I compete in frequent competitions that are organized by age, level, and mode. I'm the ISI District 14 champion, for what that's worth, not much. One thing I will say about my monetization, you can see how I did the comparisons. Because I have to pay to figure skate, a lot more goes to consumables and energy than would be normal in a game. Usually that tends to be, when a game has it, that tends to be more in the 20% range of spend. Equipment, I've started low end and then went high end, and the guild and multiplayer stuff has really added a lot to my spending in recent years. So, this may seem a little bit gratuitous for me to be talking about figure skating in a game convention, but it really, when I was digging into big spenders and realizing that I was one, it also made me realize I'm completely happy to be a big spender. I absolutely, think everything that I spend it on is worth every penny. I'll probably spend more in the future, and I'm really attached, and it really gave me some insights into, how the people who are spending significant time and money in your game feel about it. And one of the other things I realized is that games are hobbies. They are occupying the same emotional and financial space as things like golf, tennis, gardening, playing music, eating out. It's things we don't have to do, but things we enjoy doing. They occupy our leisure time and our extra money. and become very important to us in our lives. Almost any hobby is going to have people who both get involved casually and those who get in really deep. And those who get deeply involved devote significant time, energy, money. I mean, I don't think there's anything much more expensive than being a weekly golfer. Amateur guitarists, you can spend $2,000 to $8,000 on a guitar pretty easily. $100 restaurant meals add up pretty quickly. And baseball season tickets, if you're an A's fan, you can spend $1,000. If you're a Giants fan, which I am, it's more like $3,000. But you can spend a lot of money on experiences. And when we look at games, we see that that the spenders really are the people who are playing as a hobby. We divide our players up into 4 categories per game. Non-repeats, and these numbers are the average across our top 10 games. Non-repeats, people who only play once and bounce, are about 37%. Then we look at repeats, which are people in the 2 to 9 gameplay range, and that's about 40% on average. Regs or regulars, those are people who play the game 10 to 49 times, 12%. And then what we call committed players, people who play 50 or more times, are about 12%. When you look at revenue, Pac-Man is back. The people who play 50 or more times are the vast, vast majority of the revenue, 84%. Regulars contribute a significant amount, 13%. The other groups, if they don't get to 10 gameplays, you don't get much of anything. So another way to look at this is breaking it down. These are the stats, the ARPU for each of these groups. And one of the interesting things is that when you look across games, there's almost no variation in the spend on the lower groups. It's always 0 to 1 cents on the non-repeats, 8 to 12 on repeats, 80 cents to $1.20 on regs. What really varies game to game is the committed and how much they're spending, and that's usually driven by ARPU. And how well a game does depends on how many people they get to 50 or more plays and how well they monetize those people at that point. So getting back to the life cycle and my figure skating, how did I get to be a big spending butterfly? The answer is pretty gradually. I started in 2004 and not spending very much at all. It took me 2 months to even commit to buying my own skates, which I bought on sale for $100. But quickly, as I got more and more into it, it ramped up. Then there was a big drop because I started Kongregate, and I had no money and I had no time. And then, 2 years into startup life, my life stabilized again, and my spend really increased. And especially once I got into the competitive aspects in the last few years. To take it back to gaming, this is a top spender from one of our top games. This is a graph of his gameplays by month. He started playing the game in January of 2010 and has been playing it on average about 6 times a day for 2.5 years since then. So that's a hobby. If you look at their revenue, there's something fascinating going on, which is that this person played the game for 5 months and played more than 900 times before they spent a dime. He's now gone on to spend more than $20,000, but had to get really deep in before they spent anything at all. Spend gradually increased over time. Where you see a drop, that's where the game developer launched another game and neglected this one for a few months and didn't put any new content in, no expansions, no new modes. But after 3 or 4 months, the new game is launched. He goes back to this game, and there's new content, and the player gets back to spending. Interestingly, his plays were pretty steady through that period. Another interesting thing is when you look at that first month, his first purchase size was $5, followed by $20. After that, almost every purchase has been $170, consistently all the time. But again, you had to sort of warm up. So to talk about each stage, everybody knows that the first stage, this is the non-repeats, the first session is really critical. Everybody worries about about optimizing that, and that is a really sensitive point because it's very easy to drive people off. It's very easy to lose them. They have no attachment, no engagement. And I'd say in that session, the most important thing to do is to show off the core gameplay to draw players in. A tutorial shouldn't be teaching them the functions. It should be making them want to play more. You need to give them a feeling of strong initial progress, and you need to leave them wanting a bit more because you want them to be cut off in a way that they keep thinking about your game and come back. It's very easy, when somebody likes a game to play 3 or 4 hours and feel like they're done with it and leave, and you want to sort of avoid that. Appointment mechanics, energy systems are good ways of doing that. And this is something that's probably different from what a lot of other people would say, but I say, don't try to sell in the first session at all. If you think in a real-world example, if you walk into a store and a salesman just completely jumps all over you first thing, you're probably going to turn around. You don't want to do that to your players. At best, it's going to distract them from the main experience from the game, and at worst, it's going to turn them away, and you're not going to sell anything. Here's some data on how you're not going to sell anything. This is the lifetime gameplays before first purchase. The red line is a single-player game, or single-player games. The blue line is multiplayer games, and then the vertical axis is the cum % of buyers. So if you look at that first gameplay, for the multiplayer line, only about 3% are going to buy, of people who will eventually buy, are going to buy after the first gameplay. So that's 3% of 1 to 2%, which is nothing. It's negligible. Going over time, it starts to build pretty quickly. I'd say around 9 or 10 games is an inflection point. The median for a multiplayer game is 23. When you get out to 50, you've only gotten about 2/3 of the people who are going to buy at that point. So people take a really long time to start buying on a multiplayer game. So stage 2 is repeats, and this is still mostly about involving them in the game. You've got their interests, they liked what they saw, and it's time to work on a deeper attachment. The progress that they're making at this point should be visible probably to others as well as themselves. It doesn't need to be true multiplayer at this point because people are still figuring out the game, but everything that you do means more when other people can see it and it's in a social context. Multiplayer can be good, but it needs to be sort of gentle. PvP where you're getting thrown in against really good players is just going to turn people off again. It's a good time to get players into the store with free currency. You don't want to do some bait and switch where they think it's a totally free game and then you change it later on. You want to start giving them a sense of what the value is of things that they could buy. But it is still not a great time to really sell. People are very price sensitive when they don't know before they know they're invested in the game. They're very value conscious, and if you get the price down to the point where these people will buy, you're probably losing sales from people at a later stage. When you get to regular, so this is 10 or more gameplays, 10 to 49, progress can really slow down and the level of challenge can increase. The player is really substantially engaged and there can be more friction. What's really important though is the gradual shift to the end game, and that has to be social and multiplayer, almost without exception. Guilds are huge and some sort of competitive element is really important. It doesn't need to be, PvP, but that can be good, but you need both a connection to other users and a strong competitive element. And this is the point where they're ready to start buying cost-effective, impactful items. First-time buyer packages and sales really make sense, and this is where you can start ramping things up. To give you a sense of the progress, this is looking at buyers and their life-to-date gameplays and how many of them have converted to buying. So it's life-to-date gameplays on the horizontal axis and percent that have converted to paid on the vertical axis. Down at 1, it's basically 0. Once you get out to 900 plays, it's 40%. I stopped it at 900, but you could take it to 3,000, 4,000, and more. And at that point, you're talking 60 or 70% of the people remaining have paid. If they stick, they're going to buy. If there's something worth buying, that's the other caveat. So stage 4, committed players, this is where the money is, and this is where I think a lot of game developers fall down, not realizing how important it is to invest in this, to think about it up front, and to keep going on it for years, because people should be playing your game for years. When you build a game, you should expect that you're going to need to support it, if it's successful, for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and have something for people. You need to keep their interest. Content expansions, features, modes are important. Even with multiplayer elements that keep things dynamic and fresh, you still need to be bringing in new content and changing up the game and changing players' expectations, just so that it's a continual challenge. They still need goals, but progress can be pretty slow, and it can be, group goals are great. Friends in the game keep people coming back. We've had a game where there was a crisis and some people left because they were upset, and then we had a rush of people asking for refunds, and they said, well, it's not that I'm pissed at the game, it's just that my friends left and there's no point in me being here. So the friends that people make in a game really, really keep them there. And people at this stage are not sensitive to price, income allowing. $50 items, $100 items, more, all make sense. And they can be, only sort of incremental upgrades on what they've done before. When I upgraded my skates, I spent 10 times as much for skates that were about twice as good. And I think that kind of carries over really well in games. You can even sell cosmetic items, which up to this point, nobody will really buy cosmetic items. But the important thing is you need a lot of things for them to buy, and they still need to have some real purpose in the game. A trap that a lot of games get into is, they sell something that is useful once and satisfies a need. Like you sell them one really good gun, and then the player doesn't need anything more and doesn't buy again. So be careful that you plan your items and you plan what you sell to be something that can be sort of infinitely varied and expandable. Collectible card games, one of the reasons why they're great is because that's totally natural. So I could talk about this for forever, and I wish I could have done more in-game examples. I'll probably do a longer webinar at some point, so if you want to hear about that, you can follow me on Emily G. We're also all happy to talk to anybody about their games. Anthony and Peter from Kongregate are here as well, and you can email us at any time. So thank you.